Our story begins with a pizza man arriving somewhere. He gets a bad surprise by having another man hold him at gunpoint. He orders the pizza man to get against the wall. Once the gunman tells him to get on his knees, the pizza man recognizes his voice. He calls the gunman Jack, who is amazed to see who the pizza man is. They are both taken aback at each other's unusual presence. Now Jack doesn't know what to do because this man is supposedly his friend. But in a few seconds, he reverts to his previous mindset of ordering the guy against the wall. Jack points his gun at the man's head, and we hear it fire without seeing it. 11 days earlier, that same individual who behaved frantically now sits inside a much different setting with a much calmer demeanor. He tells someone we don't see that his nightmare is always the same. Jack follows a trail of blood that soon leads him to a little boy who holds his mom. She is filled with shrapnel. The boy is asking her to wake up. He thinks it's just a game. At that point, Jack has to say that maybe life is just a game. He also says he should have taken that boy to safety. However, all he could do was take out his camera to take his photo. He was simply doing his job. The person we don't see tells Jack this dream is certainly a trigger for him. She wonders why he keeps coming back to this story. Then he gets a phone call he doesn't answer. It was from his wife, Claire. He tells his therapist that Claire wants him to get a job. That is somewhat of a problem because he's still having a hard time getting adjusted. These things take time, the therapist tells him. She also says he is ready for new challenges and needs to step out of his comfort zone. The next scene shows us Claire. She enters an auction house, where she sits beside her friend. The auctioneer shows the bidders a certain camera from the 1930s. Claire tells her friend that Jack used to collect cameras, though he gave it up when he returned from a place we currently don't know about. After that, Jack is home with her, eating dinner. They talk about his therapy session, which he says went well. In a short time, his wife brings him a surprise box. The lady smiles, saying it's their early anniversary gift. Jack opens it to take out the camera Claire managed to acquire at the auction. He does not know what to say. She starts talking about how special it is, making Jack say he loves it. If he wants to test his new device, he could try it at an event that will be taking place at Claire's job. Following this, the man goes to the attic. He looks through some war photos there. Perhaps that is where he returned from, and the reason he's in therapy. At another time, Jack goes to many different places to use his camera to take photos. Once he finishes doing that, he takes his film to a photo processing facility. The photographer tells a man who works there that he used to visit the place during his high school years. The man he says this to was the manager at that time in addition to now. Jack feels the need to tell him it's exciting to be shooting again. Then we see Claire jogging outside. Soon another person starts jogging behind her. Noticing it, she runs away from it. No longer is it a leisurely jog. Upon arriving home, the troubled lady sits on the floor near the front door. She informs her husband about what happened. She even saw the man doing something indecent. This unsettling news intrigues Jack as to the man's whereabouts. Claire just describes what he looks like. Jack wants to call the police regarding this incident. She objects to that due to the man not knowing where they live. If police cars arrive, the man might learn her location. Afterward, Jack enters a bar to see his friend, Walt. He is the man we saw delivering the pizza in the beginning. Jack shares with him that he's finally shooting again. Walt is happy for his friend. Interestingly, Jack says he promised himself he would never pick up another camera. Outside, Walt says he does not know what Jack had to deal with, but he knows he did everything he could to do the right thing. According to Walt, it would be a real shame if Jack never picked up a camera again. At home, Jack watches television with Claire. The news informs them that a 5-year-old boy lost his life. Jack says he was at that playground yesterday. Later, our protagonist comes to pick up his developed photos from the facility. The manager tells him they had an issue. Because of this, Jack's photos came out in black and white. The good news is that Jack won't be charged for the inconvenience. He comes home to look at them. One photo catches his attention. It has a little boy lying deceased in the playground. This causes Jack to remember what he heard on the news. Looking at other photos, he sees more deceased people, so he picks one of them to visit the site. Jack is compelled to make sense of this abnormality. In that location, a person happens to fall from a building. Suddenly, he is back at home, washing blood off. He must be wondering what it was he witnessed. The camera seems to have predicted someone's demise. In his room, Jack burns the photo that contains a young boy lying lifeless beside a pool. Then we see him looking at a website that instructs one how to perform CPR. It seems like he's already catching on to what the camera is showing him. In the next scene, the couple occupies the pool. Of all things, Jack perceives himself walking there with his camera. He soon finds himself alone in the area with heavy clouds moving at an unusually high speed. Jack wakes up in somewhat of a panic. Back at home, Claire informs her husband that a kid drowned in the pool after they left. Jack is taken aback by that. Subsequently, he is at the bar with Walt. Jack shows him the photos, wanting to know what his friend sees. Looking at the photos seems to disturb him. He says he doesn't want to see what's on them. The reason Jack wanted to present the photos was to make sure he wasn't the only one seeing the deceased. Then comes the important question that comes about once someone realizes they have acquired a power that others don't possess. Jack asks Walt what he would do if he knew a person would be in danger. Would he feel obligated to save that person? His friend replies that he would call the police. He also says that if one drinks while taking medication, it could deliver quite the effect. But Jack tells him that is not what's happening to him. Before leaving, Walt tries calming him by saying Jack is back home and everyone loves him. Left alone, Jack sees a trail of blood. He also sees that it's already late. It prompts him to check his phone, which has missed calls along with several messages from Claire. In the morning, he tells his wife he lost track of time last night. She asks if it was another blackout. It was kind of different, he says. After that, Jack sits in his car, looking at a photo of a deceased lady. He stays there until night. That is the time he witnesses a fire through a window. So he puts on the role of the hero to venture inside the room, where he sees the fainted lady from his photo. He carries her outside to leave her near a boy. On the next day, he watches the news. The boy tells the reporter about Jack's heroic action. Although he saved the lady, unfortunately, her mother was claimed by the flames. Following this, Jack is at a library researching serial murder. He reads that a lady ended her. The website tells Jack the address of this cabin. The next scene has Jack visiting a man who specializes in cameras. As the man examines Jack's special device, we witness the glass on a framed photo cracking in Jack's room. The man educates him that the camera was manufactured in Germany during the end of the Second World War. When Jack tells him he took pictures with the camera, the man's response is very interesting. He does not think the device can generate an exposure. Back at home, while Jack sleeps, a black centipede crawls on his face. It causes him to wake up in a state of alarm. But the insect isn't there anymore. In the morning, Jack gifts his wife with an easel for their anniversary. He reminds Claire of what he told her in Rome, that she was a much better artist than he was a photographer. Then he collects more of his photos and looks at them in his car. More deceased people are on them. One of them happens to be Claire. Of course, this troubles Jack greatly. He breaks the driver's window out of anger. This discovery makes him behave cautiously. He calls her to say they should go elsewhere for dinner that night. Back in his room, Jack sees the cracked glass on the photo. Claire calls him to say she's at the restaurant they always go to. She decided not to listen to him. Therefore, he rushes to her. Walking inside the restaurant, Jack bumps into several people out of nervousness until he sits near Claire. He tells her they have to go before hallucinating, seeing blood on her. Since he behaves recklessly, she agrees to leave. In the parking garage, a homeless man comes to them, asking for money. Jack's mind is quickly acquiring chaos, so he aggressively comes to the man to ask if he's following them. However, he's not the problem. Another man approaches to hold the couple at gunpoint, demanding the same thing the homeless man did. Jack cooperates by giving his wallet and his wife's purse. As he tosses the second item, the robber fires his gun by mistake. He ends up shooting the homeless man, who falls a respectable distance from the garage. At night, Jack looks at more photos in his room. He sees that same lady whom he rescued from the burning apartment. She now has a new problem. Even worse, Claire appears in another photo too. It seems like if a person's fate is interrupted, their date of demise will simply be moved slightly into the future. This begs the question, is there a way to prevent the event from happening altogether? The anger returns to Jack. Later, he drives to that house he found during his research. The man has to break in to get inside. He looks around in there for a short time prior to going outside. We see someone there passing behind him. Eventually, Jack finds a trapdoor in the ground, covered by grass. Entering it, the man sees newspaper articles decorating the walls. He starts watching a videotape on television. There is a man on it, talking about how he could control something, but everything soon crumbles around him. He also says people say they would do anything to protect the ones they love, yet they never get asked to do exactly that. A certain force has exploited him. As the TV continues to play, Jack opens a door that keeps a corpse behind it. Then, he drives out to a place where he finds a man sleeping outside. It looks like Jack is about to take his life with a tool for some reason. Instead of doing that, he starts walking away. The man wakes up, asking Jack if he needs help. He thinks the photographer does not look okay. This prompts Jack to come to him to ask if the man wants to hear a crazy story. Shortly after, Jack sits with him, telling him about the workings of the camera phenomenon. He finishes by saying that either the camera is demonic or he is psychotic. Once he says all that, the man he told it to introduces himself as Boone. He didn't understand a word Jack told him, although it's nice for him to have someone to talk with. On another day, Claire notices a knife is missing from the kitchen. Its current location is inside Jack's car. He sits inside it. He looks like the man who was jogging after Claire. Jack remembers how his wife described him, and the descriptions seem to fit rather well, so he decides to follow the deviant. Jack soon backs up into him with his car, knocking the man out. In the next scene, Jack ties the man to a barbell with weights in a garage exactly where Claire is in her lifeless photo. Of course, upon awakening, the tied man wants to know what's going on. It does not take long for him to start apologizing like he knows why this is happening now. However, the deviant's apology falls on deaf ears. Jack stabs him a few times. He looks at the photo containing the deceased Claire. It causes him to take off one of the weights to slam the man a few times. Jack wants the photo to change. In a short time, it does. It now shows him the deviant in place of his wife. Interestingly, the time the photo was taken shows 1 minute before the current time. Jack gets rid of the evidence by burning it. At home, he asks Claire if she would like to know the time and place she was going to lose her life. She starts by saying it's a weird question. However, she answers it by saying she would not want to know. According to her, it's a burden that could drive one crazy. Then Jack sees a third variation of Claire being lifeless in a photo. He attempts to deal with it by calling one of Claire's clients. He ends up moving a meeting she has with them from today to tomorrow. Afterward, he informs her that a certain lady called to switch their meeting. When Jack is brushing his teeth, he notices blood in his mouth. He pulls one tooth out, which escalates into him removing several of them. It is an unsettling sight that exists in the sink. Thankfully, once Claire comes to him, we see it wasn't real. When she asks if he's having a nightmare, he suspects that he's still sleeping. Following this, Jack goes to a store where a man eagerly comes to him. He welcomes Jack to Tad's hardware. The man happens to be Tad, who notices Jack is nowhere near as eager as he is. He doesn't want Tad's help finding anything. Due to that, Tad seems somewhat upset. Picking up a hammer, Jack gets surprised by Tad interfering with his shopping. The owner takes the hammer to talk about how good it is. In the process of showing Jack how to properly swing it, he also throws in some insults regarding Jack's masculinity. The customer takes the insults without firing back. During checkout, Jack watches the news on a TV. He learns that the corpse of serial murderer Charlie Hibbert was discovered in a storage shelter. That is the place Jack was at recently. He asks Tad if he sells anesthesia. Tad looks at all the items Jack bought. This makes Tad say he needs to know what Jack is doing. That is the moment Jack dishes out his revenge for the store owner's derogatory words by slamming him with the hammer as those words are being said. Of course, it wasn't the reason why he struck him, but it surely contributed to the intensity of the strike. Later, Jack drags him into a house. After he leaves the unconscious man for a short time, he comes back to see he is missing. While Jack searches for him, suddenly Tad jumps on him to engage in a fight. It lasts for a respectable amount of time, forcing them into different areas of the house. Eventually, Jack manages to stab him with a kitchen knife. In less than a minute, Tad shows his vitality by standing up to start running away. Running after him, Jack gets to fighting with the man again in an outside area of the second floor. That is where Jack kicks him down, and the man lands on the ground. He follows this action by dragging Tad back into the house and taking his life there. Then we see Claire at her job as a real estate agent. She is about to bring a family into a house. In the meantime, Tad is now in the photo. At night, Jack comes to Claire at the house where he left Tad. It is surrounded by the police because she found the lifeless man there. For some reason, he didn't take him out like he did previously. She sees he has a new injury. A detective also comes to them to see his wounds. This is the second time she has seen this couple at the scene of a crime. The first was the one with the homeless person. At home, Claire is very troubled with what took place. On top of that, she doesn't know who Jack is anymore. He's not the person she knew. She knows he's struggling with his life, but he never lied to her before. The man tells his worried wife that there is something in the photos he cannot explain. The next scene has Jack watching that videotape of the maniac talking. He says he was never in control. That is what the force that controlled him wanted. At the library, Jack drops a book because a centipede is crawling on it. As he tries picking it up, a boy who looks like he recently left a swimming pool passes near him. Following the boy to an elevator, Jack is too late. When he does get into one, the light goes out inside. Jack exits into complete darkness. It's uncertain what happened, though this scene appears to be symbolic of Jack entering into evil. Then he comes out of a pawn shop to sit in his car with a gun he acquired. He puts that gun along with his camera into a safe at home. There, the cycle continues of him looking at a fourth variation of a deceased Claire on a photo. To deal with this one, Jack goes someplace to pick up a harlot. Her fate was to end up lifeless in a bathtub, just like Claire was shown in the photo. We have to wonder how many times this man is going to keep doing this. Soon he hears someone entering the house. It is Claire's friend from work. Jack sees her and hides in the washroom with the deceased harlot. But the lady hears someone in the house, asking if anyone is there. Jack is forced to speak to her behind the door. He tells her he's engaged in a plumbing problem. Needless to say, she is surprised that he's the one doing the task. She tries opening the door, only to be met with resistance from Jack's end. Somehow the lady manages to knock him down to enter the room. She sees the lifeless harlot in addition to blood on the floor. All Jack can tell her is that it's not what it looks like. She starts running away, which makes him chase her. After he holds her against the wall in a non-violent manner, he says he's trying to protect Claire. Alas, the lady is too scared to listen to him. The good thing that came out of his being at the house is that Claire has been replaced by the harlot in the photo. At home, he engages in romance with Claire. While they do it, Jack perceives blood surrounding them. Yet he doesn't let that cancel their intimacy. He wants to keep doing it, perhaps for her sake. On the next day, he looks at another photo of a deceased Claire. For some reason, he says it will be the last one. The man throws the camera on the floor out of anger for all the evil it brought into his life. At night, he tells Claire he is sorry for everything he put her through. He wants to tell her everything. Then he watches the videotape of the maniac, Charlie. Again, he falls asleep, watching the TV until morning. When Jack wakes up, the static switches to show the man himself running somewhere. It also shows him Claire. A knock on the door interrupts him from watching further. It's two detectives. The lady, Detective Dawson, wants him to come with them. Following this, we see Jack is being held in custody. He imagines himself in war uniform, walking through a ruined store. Once he approaches a crying boy near his lifeless mother, Jack takes a photo. We should remember that this is the dream he described to his therapist. Out of this memory or image, Jack demands to be released due to him running out of time. He needs to take the life of another victim to save his wife. Soon Dawson barges into the room to lay out several photos of deceased people. She rhetorically asks him which was his favorite way to end a person. But her partner, Detective Ford, comes to interrupt her sense of justice, getting satisfied by informing Jack he is free to go. So he walks out. As he does, some other man walks in, who we follow for a few seconds. He starts telling an officer about the murders on the news. We don't stay with him to hear the continuation of what he has to say. Then Jack comes home to look for Claire. Unable to find her, he calls her to plead that she not go to the warehouse. He also says he doesn't know how this will end. However, he may have to go away for some time. Whatever he did it for them and Claire specifically. His final words are that he loves her. Switching back to the police station, that man who entered is now talking to Ford. After he mentions Jack's name, Ford walks away in realization. He understands it was a mistake to release Jack. Next, the photographer arrives at the warehouse. He yells out to Boone with the intention of taking his life to save Claire's. Meanwhile, the police are at his house. Ford finds a photo of a deceased Claire at the warehouse. Since Jack can't locate Boone, he orders a pizza. The delivery person is the one he will have to bring his final day to. He is running out of time. Subsequently, Ford figures out where the warehouse is from the photo. After that, we see the starting scene of our story. Walt arrives with a box of pizza prior to having Jack surprise him by holding him at gunpoint. The rest we already know. Jack fires his gun, but what we didn't see previously is that he doesn't shoot his friend. Jack runs to a location where he sees a deceased Claire. Charlie is standing beside her. He tells Jack this had to end. It was supposed to be his last victim. Jack replies. He cries beside her as Charlie leaves. The last thing we see Jack looking at is that centipede. Despite being deceased himself, Charlie was probably there to indicate that Jack became just as deranged as him.